Good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending today's talk. My name is Todd. I'm the CISO at Airgap Networks, and I'm honored to have Dr. Chase Cunningham, who's a legend in the security circles. Definitely. He's my guest today. So, Chase, can you give a quick introduction?
Yeah, thanks for having me. If I'm a legend, the bar's been set way too low, but appreciate the invite. Yeah, I'm retired military, did a bunch of work for the government, was a forester analyst for a few years, and then have been bouncing around just doing ZT work everywhere I can since then.
All right. Since you mentioned that, I spend a lot of time on these roundtables and all these security discussions, and there's a lot of talk about zero trust. Um, but when I ask people, people don't really know and understand what it is. So can I get your definition of zero trust?
Well, I think that it's really important that people don't get so wrapped up in trying to have like a singular kind of biblical definition of this thing, right? I mean, really, the most important part is what are we removing when we talk about zero trust? We're removing trust relationships from within systems. This doesn't mean I'm not trusting my employees, which is something people fight with me all the time about. This is not zero faith, it's zero trust. I have faith that my people are good people. I have faith that they will try and do the right thing, even though sometimes that's not really, the right thing to believe, but it is what it is. This is about removing inherent trust from computerized and network systems. And when we talk about that, we mean default credentials, excess privileges, lateral movement, all the things that the bad guy needs to be successful by default and by the nature of configuration. That's what we're removing. So I've fought like for years with trying to come up with what I think is a really succinct definition of ZT. I don't really know that there's a whole lot of value in that, to be perfectly frank, because this is something that's applicable to every organization in their own context. The point is to remove trusted relationships from systems. So let's just, I guess, level set with that.
Okay, so I saw your zero trust map that I think you made with Richard. Um, how did you guys kind of start that concept, and who's really using it right now to get real value out of it?
Yeah, so I think the last count that I had so far on like looks and downloads and whatever else was somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 total. So there's a lot of people that are looking at that. And basically what we did was, luckily Richard was at Gartner for a long time. John Kindervag was at Forrester. I was at Forrester. So we kind of took the analyst approach to the problem and spent a lot of time crawling through the market. And we literally looked at every vendor we could find on the internet that said that they did ZT something. And then we kind of reached out to a bunch of end users that we knew had touched that technology or used it or interacted with it and said, is this viable? Does it do this thing? And if so, what are you using it for? And then we used my framework, the Zero Trust Extended Ecosystem framework, and carved up those vendors into the capabilities so that people can look at this really quickly and go, I'm doing zero trust, but I'm solving for identity and access management. And which vendors do I am? Or I'm doing zero trust right now, and I'm solving for isolation segmentation. Who does isolation segmentation? Instead of trying to sit there and Google and go, I want to do ZT, and then having to spend 3 weeks of your own time crawling through this stuff. So it's free and open to the public. We're not, putting dollars in the pocket on this thing. This is because we believe in the mission and the effort, and it's really making things turn a corner. The moment that I start getting emails from vendors going, well, wait a minute, that's not where we think we fit. I know that we're getting it right, because a little bit of discomfort for the people that are running the show is a good thing.
Exactly. Do you have it handy where you can share it and we can walk through it?
Let me bring up the newest one, because I just published an update this morning, as a matter of fact. Let's see.
So it basically lists all the companies in the different areas of security,
Yeah,
but it
well, so
doesn't
it's all specific
prefer any other one.
right. It's all specific to ZT. So I tried to make a really concerted effort of not looking at security in general. As a matter of fact, we started with security in general, which I think the number we had was about 870 something vendors that do security, which is crazy. And then we said, okay, well, who specifically does zero trust? And as we get into it, you're able to kind of look through this and look at the market itself. So here's some people that do passwordless. Here's folks that do PAM. Here's identity and access management. Who does ZTNA, right? So you're able to really quickly dial in who has swig capabilities. It's just to help people understand kind of who does what where. I even created a couple of new branches within this because we had feedback from end users that they needed this. So like obfuscation, redaction, tokenization. You can see isolation, segmentation. So I mean, this is the big bad thing for the market. It's a constantly evolving monster, but that's a good thing, right? And I've had a lot of folks reach back to me offline and say, thank God somebody's done this, because we would have spent 6 weeks trying to do this ourselves.
Exactly. So it's a big time saver in research.
Yeah, it's just the whole thing is just to provide some clarity. And I mean, I'll admit, if anybody asks me like flat out, is this 1,000% perfect? No, because we're 3 people trying to do this on our own time. Is it a lot better than Googling for stuff and trying to figure it out yourself? You betcha.
Cool. So I thought I saw my company in there.
Yeah.
And we're kind of a microsegmentation vendor without agents. So where do we fit in on here?
So right now I've got Airgap into isolation and segmentation. And the reason for that is because that's back to what I kind of said, right? Is you enable zero trust with your approach. The problem, what the end users have said that Airgap does really well is enables isolation and segmentation. And that's a good thing if you kind of wrap your head around the problem space. There's really small, very niche problems. Like maybe I'm just doing something on an endpoint or just doing something on a IoT device, but there's also solving bigger problems like writ large isolation segmentation. So that's the value of the map itself too, to kind of understand there's little bitty branches and very small capabilities that are really specific and kind of best of breed for that one thing. And then there's bigger problems that can be solved at the enterprise and larger level, which are these larger branches, such as isolation and segmentation.
Okay. Because I saw your OT security as well. And
yeah,
I've been doing a lot of research on that too, as far as vendors go. I think it's up at the top right.
We just put this feature in here too, so you can actually go and type in there and see which vendors go where. So, and this thing will evolve too. So as we talk to more end users that are leveraging solutions like Airgap and they're saying, hey, we're using this for OT as well, we'll probably wind up mapping those capabilities off across to those offerings too.
Okay, so this is basically a live document that's always being updated. So we point at a web page and we can see it constantly updated as opposed to a PDF or something, correct?
Correct. And if somebody wants this, they can just go get it. It's really, it's out there. Like I said, this is just on the internet. So all somebody's got to do is go look at it. So OT, IoT, and again, we're 2 or 3 people crawling through this. So as we update, new stuff will be added.
So I don't see like SASE or any of those marketing terms on here, because I see a lot of companies that go from CASB, oh no, now we're a SASE company, now we're a zero trust company, and they keep evolving, right?
Yeah, well, that's part of the thing too, was to bake off a lot of that cross pollination. Personally, I think SASE is number one. I can't imagine a CISO ever wanting to stand up in a room full of their peers and say, I'm SASE. I think that's hilarious. Number two, really, when you talk about zero trust, that's a bigger, broader, more strategic initiative. The secure service edge side, I could actually say that that's being solved with some of the branches on this map.
Okay. I mean, I see when we're out kind of evangelizing what Airgap does, we see a ton of companies that still have totally flat networks. They're still using MPLS. They're looking at SD-WAN or using ACLs to kind of protect lateral movement. And I kind of cringe when I see that, because especially in the big companies, their ACL list can get hundreds of pages. And how do you manage that? So what trends are you seeing in segmentation today? And how are people applying it, if at all?
Well, they're starting to apply it a lot more, which is a good thing. A lot around east-west, sort of. I almost would call it like micro isolation, micro segmentation is kind of the term that's been tossed around a lot. I don't know if I necessarily agree with segmentation. I think it's really more isolation because ultimately that's what happens is it's isolated. But the benefit there, the real benefit, if you say why would you do that, is establishing command and control, better visibility, and eliminating lateral movement. And if you take those things and tie it into the bad guy life cycle, you're taking back a pretty substantial piece of the initiative from the adversary because that's what they want. You know, all these APTs and criminal groups and whatever else. It's not a one and done thing. They go after systems and they want to stay there. They want to move. In order to do that, they've got to be able to do that, and they're looking for complexity because with complexity comes confusion, and they're looking for lack of visibility and lack of control. And if you have those things in place, which you're talking about, if I'm a bad guy, like that's a very sweet spot to be. So you want to remove that, and we're starting to see that become a pretty focused effort for the majority of enterprises.
Okay, so if I heard that right, um, segmentation you kind of see as VLANs and segmenting networks apart, whereas isolation is more what we do, where we isolate every single device so they can't talk to each other. So it kind of limits ransomware from spreading from device to device and stops that lateral movement.
Yeah, it's a functional thing, right? Of where you can do this the right way and it's not impacting how the business operates and it's pretty transparent to the user, especially when you're talking about things deep into the infrastructure like this. But it's also very problematic for the bad guy because they want to move. It's back to my military days, move and shoot. That's how you gain tactical advantage. That's what they want to do, move and shoot sort of in the cyberspace. If you can stop them from doing that, you're taking back the initiative, which is helping you keep them isolated. And another core tenet of ZT is assume breach, accept compromise. Like someone somewhere somehow will cause a compromise. So this whole approach around isolation segmentation makes a lot of sense because I'm not relying on perfect defense. I'm actually relying on defensive offense, I guess you could say. I don't know how you'd say that, but something along those lines.
So last one here, especially since you came from a military background, I'd really like to hear your opinion on this because I hear a variety of opinions from different CISO circles and just want to hear yours. So this whole war in Eastern Europe, the number of attacks is obviously going up, and there's a variety of different ones. We don't know if they're actually coming from Russia or if people are just taking advantage of what's going on over there. So what do you suggest to not only large companies, but there's all these small businesses, medium businesses that don't have the means to pay for all those things on your list. So how would they apply zero trust?
Well, I mean, number one, I know something about cyber warfare, right? Like I wrote the book on it.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think that the point that I would try and make for everybody there is that this is the only time in history where everyone is on the battlefield all the time. Whether you like it or not, you're engaged in cyber conflict at some part. They may be using your infrastructure to attack other things. You might be fallout from an attack. You might be engaged in conflict, but your business, your person, your home, your whatever, and if it touches electrons, you're on the battlefield. So deal with the problem in that way and think about it that way. The other thing that people should be doing is really putting things in place that aren't excessively expensive and that actually fix a core problem. And things like isolation, segmentation are key and core to this. There's things in this space that I absolutely am not a fan of. I won't blast them on a call because I don't think that that's professional, but there's things that we sell and we market that are just ibuprofen for arterial bleed. Not a good deal. We want things that actually will eliminate the adversary's ability to be effective. So I would tell organizations, think about it in that manner. Think about what the adversary needs to be successful, and then start removing those things. You won't get them all at once. You won't get them all right 1,000% of the time. But if you're the harder target, they'll find someone else.
What about the easy targets? How do we get the message out to them? Because when I talk to potential customers, like I said, a lot of them just have a flat network. They'll have some firewall that's, I don't know how far behind in updates and firmware, and there's like, hey, I got a firewall, I should be good, right? They don't have MFA, they don't have anything in place. How, I mean, that's the heart of America. How do we address that problem?
Well, I think we're slowly doing some of that, and it's starting to become something people are aware of. But the real value that we have to continue, in my opinion, to push to people is that being secure and being able to do business without disruption is a competitive differentiator. Like that makes you a better business, which everybody wants to be, makes you make more money, make customers happy, all those cool things. It's not about doing more security for the sake of more security. Only security people like you and me like doing security. Everybody else just wants to do their job and do it quicker, better, faster. If you're doing security and cyber right, you won't be the slow gazelle. You will be the one that continues to keep up and do things quicker, better, faster. So I think if you're trying to say what should we, the security people, be saying to the business people and everyone in general, like, look, this is about you and your business and your future. If you want to be better than the competitor, which you do in a business context, you need better cyber.
I do have one more question, actually. Just thought of this while you were talking about that. So your map has a bunch of vendors, which is basically a bunch of tools to protect against zero trust, right? So I'm in this constant, I don't call it an argument, but we'll call it a debate in these roundtables with CISOs where frameworks versus tools. So the argument is if I follow CIS or NIST or these frameworks to the T, or at least the top 20, I'm going to be safe and I'm going to be fine. So what's your opinion versus frameworks versus tools?
Well, I mean, I think frameworks are guides. That's what people seem to forget, is that they're put out there to kind of give you a reference and say, okay, that's a good academic approach to the problem. However, I'm going to have differences and nuances that are more for me, and then I should take some of those concepts and ideas and make it my own. I mean, even this doesn't say thou shalt only do 800.207, right? They say here it is. This is what we think makes sense. Kind of make it your own. So they should think about doing that. And the other piece is, people should remember that, to my knowledge, there's never been a breach activity or a compromise where the bad guys said, oh my gosh, they're compliant, let's stop. That's not the thing. So you have to do better than that, in order to be better. It just is what it is. So not getting wrapped up in trying to chase that compliance rabbit, and really knowing how you should use your tools best to counter the adversary's capability. And then a framework is a guide, it's a reference. Use it that way. It's not biblical.
Awesome. I 100% agree with you. So that's it. We're going to wrap it up on that. I appreciate you coming and answering all my questions today. And we'll wrap it up from here.
Hey, thanks a lot.